When billionaire Adrian Blackwell saw his pregnant ex-wife collapse on a busy Los Angeles sidewalk, he thought he was witnessing a medical emergency. He had no idea he was about to uncover the most twisted conspiracy of his life. Elena Martinez wasn't just homeless and starving. She was the target of an elaborate scheme designed to destroy her completely and steal the most precious thing she had. What started as a chance encounter would expose corruption reaching the highest levels of power and force a man to choose between his empire and his soul. This is the story of how far someone will go for revenge and how far someone else will go for redemption. You won't believe what happens next. The Los Angeles traffic stretched endlessly ahead, a river of brake lights bleeding red into the smoky afternoon sky. Adrian Blackwell drummed his manicured fingers against the leather steering wheel of his black Tesla, his jaw tight with the familiar irritation of being trapped among the masses. Beside him, Victoria Sterling scrolled through her phone with practiced indifference, her diamond engagement ring catching the light as she swiped past another charity event invitation. "The Henderson Gala is next week," Victoria said without looking up, her voice carrying the entitled drawl of old money. "We need to be seen there. Your reputation needs some polishing after that housing development scandal." Adrian barely registered her words. His mind was elsewhere, calculating profit margins and acquisition targets. Success had always been his drug of choice, and today's merger had given him another fix. 3.7 million in profit from a single signature. Not bad for a kid who'd grown up in a trailer park. The traffic lurched forward, then stopped again. Through the tinted window, Adrian watched the usual urban theater unfold. Street vendors hawked wilted flowers to commuters. A homeless man pushed a shopping cart loaded with his entire world. A young mother juggled groceries while trying to calm her crying toddler. Then his breath caught. On the crowded sidewalk near the entrance of a small coffee shop, a woman stumbled. Her hand flew instinctively to her swollen abdomen, a gesture so protective and familiar that it sent a shock of recognition through Adrian's chest. She was slender despite her pregnancy, her dark hair escaping from a messy ponytail. Her clothes hung loose, clearly second-hand, but there was something about the way she carried herself. The world seemed to slow as she crumpled to the concrete. "Elena," he whispered. "What did you say?" Victoria's voice cut through his trance, but Adrian was already throwing open the car door. "I have to go." "Go, Adrian. What are you doing?" "We have the meeting with the investors in 20 minutes." But Adrian was already weaving through the stalled cars, his Italian leather shoes pounding against the asphalt. His heart hammered against his ribs as he pushed through the small crowd that had gathered around the fallen woman. "Let me through," he commanded, his voice carrying the authority that had built his empire. He knelt beside her, and his worst fears were confirmed. Elena Martinez, his ex-wife, lay unconscious on the dirty sidewalk, her face pale as paper, her lips tinged blue. Her hands were positioned protectively over her pregnant belly, even in unconsciousness, defending the life growing inside her. "Someone call 911, Adrian barked to the crowd. A teenager was already on his phone, speaking rapidly to emergency services. Elena's eyelids fluttered open, revealing the warm brown eyes that had once looked at him with such love, such trust. Now they held only confusion and pain. When her gaze focused on his face, disbelief flooded her features. "Adrian." Her voice was barely a whisper, fragile as spun glass. "Don't try to talk," he said, surprised by the roughness in his own voice. "Help is coming." She looked so small, so fragile. This wasn't the strong, determined woman who had worked double shifts as a nurse to put him through law school. This wasn't the Elena who had believed in his dreams when he had nothing but ambition and student debt. This was a shadow of that woman, worn down by circumstances he could only imagine. The sound of sirens grew louder, cutting through the traffic noise. Adrian carefully slipped his arms under Elena's frame, lifting her with the gentleness he'd once reserved for handling priceless artifacts. She weighed almost nothing, her body trembling against his chest. "The baby," she whispered, her voice thick with fear. "The baby will be fine," he promised, though he had no right to make such promises. "You're both going to be fine." As the paramedics took over, Adrian found himself following the ambulance to the hospital, his Tesla trailing the wailing siren like a shadow from his past. In his rearview mirror, he could see Victoria standing beside his abandoned car, her perfect composure finally cracked, her phone pressed to her ear as she undoubtedly tried to salvage their ruined meeting. But for the first time in years, Adrian didn't care about the money. The hospital emergency room smelled of antiseptic and desperation, a sharp contrast to the expensive cologne that still clung to Adrian's suit. He paced the waiting area like a caged animal, his usual composure shattered by the weight of seeing Elena so vulnerable, so broken. "Doctor..." Sarah Chen emerged from the treatment area, her scrubs wrinkled from a long shift, her expression professionally neutral. "Mr. Blackwell, you're listed as the emergency contact. How is she?" The words came out rougher than he intended. "Severe dehydration and malnutrition. Her blood sugar is dangerously low, and she's showing signs of gestational diabetes that's been left untreated." Dr. Chen's voice carried a hint of accusation. "How long has she been living without proper medical care?" Adrian's stomach twisted. "I don't know. We've been divorced for over a year. The baby appears stable for now, but Ms. Martinez needs immediate intervention, proper nutrition, rest, and prenatal care. Her current living situation is not sustainable for a healthy pregnancy." "What living situation, doctor?" Chen studied his face carefully. "She gave her address as her car. Mr. Blackwell, she's been living in her car." The words hit him like a physical blow. Elena, who had once shared his penthouse overlooking the city, was homeless. Pregnant and homeless. While he'd been building his empire, accumulating wealth beyond imagination, the woman who'd sacrificed everything for his success had been sleeping in her car. "Can I see her?" "She's awake, but weak. Room 212. Adrian found Elena propped up in the hospital bed, an IV line snaking into her arm. She looked even more fragile under the harsh fluorescent lights, her skin translucent, dark circles shadowing her eyes. When she saw him, her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "You don't have to stay," she said, her voice steady despite her condition. "I can handle this. Like you've been handling everything else." The words escaped before he could stop them, and he immediately regretted the harshness in his tone. Elena's eyes flashed with the fire he remembered. "Don't you dare judge me. Adrian, you have no idea what my life has been like since you decided I wasn't worth keeping around." The silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken history. Adrian remembered their last fight, the cold calculation with which he'd presented the divorce papers. He'd convinced himself it was logical, efficient. Elena deserved better than a man consumed by ambition. She'd be happier without him. Looking at her now, he realized how spectacularly wrong he'd been. "The baby," he said quietly. "Is it mine?" Elena's laugh was bitter. "Would it matter? You made it very clear you had no interest in family complications. Answer the question, Elena." She met his gaze steadily. "Yes, it's yours. Conceived during our last weekend together, before you served me with papers and married your ambition." The room spun slightly. He was going to be a father. Elena was carrying his child, and she'd been facing it alone, living in her car, working minimum wage jobs to survive. Why didn't you tell me? Because I knew exactly what you'd do. You'd write a check and consider your obligation fulfilled. You'd find a way to make it another business transaction. Her voice broke slightly. I've seen how you solve problems. Adrian, you throw money at them until they disappear. Before he could respond, the door opened. Victoria Sterling swept in like a thundercloud, her designer heels clicking against the linoleum floor. She'd changed from her afternoon outfit into something more camera-ready, clearly anticipating the media attention that followed wherever the Blackwell name went. "There you are," Victoria said, her voice honey-sweet, but her eyes cold as winter. "I've been worried sick." Elena's face went carefully blank, but Adrian caught the way her hands instinctively moved to protect her belly. "Victoria, this isn't the time." "Isn't it?" Victoria's smile never wavered as she took in Elena's appearance. "How fascinating to run into your ex-wife. And she's pregnant. How far along are you, dear?" 7 months, Elena said quietly. Victoria's eyes sharpened as she did the math. 7 months ago. Adrian had still been married to Elena. 7 months ago. Victoria had been planning their engagement party, believing she was marrying a free man. "Well," Victoria said, her voice still sickeningly sweet, "isn't this just perfect?" The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees, and Adrian realized that seeing Elena collapse on the sidewalk had been only the beginning of his problems. 3 days later. Elena sat in the modest apartment Adrian had arranged, staring at the hospital discharge papers spread across the small dining table. The 2-bedroom unit in a middle-class neighborhood was a palace compared to her car, but it felt like another kind of prison. The rent was paid for 6 months, the refrigerator stocked with healthy food, and a part-time nurse checked on her daily, all of it courtesy of Adrian's guilt money. She should be grateful. She was grateful. But gratitude felt dangerous when it came from the man who destroyed her life with the same cold efficiency he brought to his business deals. A knock at the door interrupted her brooding. Marcus Torres stood on her doorstep, his paramedic uniform rumpled from a long shift, his dark eyes warm with concern. Marcus had been her best friend since nursing school, the one person who'd stayed loyal through the divorce and its aftermath. "How are you holding up?" he asked, settling into the chair across from her. "Like I'm living in a fairy tale that could disappear at any moment." Marcus studied her face carefully. "You don't trust this. Him paying for everything. Would you, Adrian doesn't do anything without calculating the return on investment? I just can't figure out what he thinks he's buying. Maybe he's buying peace of mind. Maybe seeing you like that shook him up." Elena touched her belly absently, feeling the baby's restless movements. "Or maybe he's buying control, making sure I'm dependent on him again." Her phone buzzed with a text message, the prenatal appointment reminder she'd set, tomorrow at 2 p.m., and Adrian had insisted on coming. She'd tried to refuse, but he'd pointed out that his insurance was covering the costs, so he had a right to be informed about his child's health. Everything came back to money and control with him. "There's something else," Marcus said, his voice careful. "I've been asking around about your husband, ex-husband. Some of the guys at the station have worked events at his buildings. Word is, he's not as clean as his public image suggests." Elena looked up sharply. "What do you mean? Nothing concrete. Just whispers about money moving in ways that don't quite add up. Shell companies, overseas accounts, the kind of thing that makes cops take notice." "Are you saying he's involved in something illegal?" I'm saying maybe the golden boy isn't as golden as everyone thinks. Before Elena could respond, her phone rang. Adrian's name appeared on the screen, and her stomach tightened reflexively. Elena. His voice was warm, concerned. The voice he'd used when they were happy, before success had turned him into someone she didn't recognize. How are you feeling today? Fine. Better. Good. I was thinking about tomorrow's appointment. Would you like me to pick you up? I could drive you there. The offer sounded innocent enough, but Elena heard the underlying assumption that she needed him, that she couldn't manage on her own. I can get there myself. I know you can. I just thought it might be easier, more comfortable. There it was again, the careful manipulation disguised as consideration, making her seem unreasonable for wanting independence. All right, she said finally, but I'm driving myself home. Of course. Whatever makes you comfortable. After she hung up, Marcus shook his head. He's good. I'll give him that. Makes it sound like he's doing you a favor while making sure you feel guilty for not being more grateful. He wasn't always like this, Elena said softly. When we met, he was different. Driven, yes. But there was warmth in him. Vulnerability. Maybe that person is still in there somewhere. Or maybe I just imagined him because I needed to believe in something. That night, Elena lay awake feeling the baby move inside her, wondering if she was making a terrible mistake by letting Adrian back into her life. But every time she thought about cutting ties completely, she remembered her bank account balance, the reality of raising a child alone with no safety net. She hated that she needed him, and she suspected that was exactly how he wanted it. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. Elena opened her door to find 2 police officers, their expressions professional but not unfriendly. Ms. Martinez, we need to ask you some questions about your relationship with Adrian Blackwell. Elena's heart stopped. What kind of questions? May we come in? As they settled in her living room, Elena felt the baby kick urgently, as if sensing her distress. We're investigating some financial irregularities in Mr. Blackwell's business dealings, the older officer explained. We understand you were married to him until recently. Yes, but I don't know anything about his business. He kept that separate from our personal life. Did you ever notice any unusual activities? Large cash deposits, meetings with people who seemed out of place, travel to unusual destinations. Elena's mind raced back through their marriage, searching for red flags she might have missed. There had been late-night phone calls, hushed conversations that stopped when she entered a room, business trips that seemed to involve more secrecy than necessary. I don't know, she said honestly. Maybe, but I can't be sure. The officers exchanged glances. Ms. Martinez, if you remember anything that might be relevant, please call us. And be careful. If Mr. Ben Blackwell is involved in what we think he might be involved in, you could be in danger. After they left, Elena sat in her comfortable apartment that suddenly felt much less safe, wondering if she'd just stepped into a trap much more complex than she'd realized. The prenatal appointment should have been routine. Elena had attended dozens of them alone, finding comfort in the steady rhythm of her baby's heartbeat, the grainy images on the ultrasound screen that proved life was growing inside her despite everything that had gone wrong. But sitting beside Adrian in Dr. Martinez's office, watching his face as he saw their child for the first time, Elena felt her carefully constructed walls beginning to crack. Is that the head? Adrian asked, his voice soft with wonder. Yes, and there's the spine, Dr. Martinez said, moving the ultrasound wand to capture different angles. Everything looks very healthy. The baby's growth has improved significantly since Ms. Martinez began receiving proper nutrition. Elena caught the subtle accusation in the doctor's tone and felt Adrian tense beside her. He'd been asking questions about her medical history, clearly horrified by what he'd learned about her living conditions. "When will we know the gender?" Adrian asked. Elena noticed the pronoun but didn't correct him. There was something seductive about not facing this alone, about sharing the weight of responsibility and decision-making. "We can find out today if you'd like." Elena looked at Adrian, seeing genuine excitement in his eyes. For a moment, he looked like the man she'd fallen in love with in law school, the one who'd talked about the future with such passion, who'd made her believe they could build something beautiful together. "It's a girl," Dr. Martinez announced, smiling at the screen. Adrian's hand found Elena's, his fingers intertwining with hers in a gesture that felt both foreign and achingly familiar. "A daughter," he whispered. "Have you thought about names?" Dr. Martinez asked. "Sophia," Elena said without thinking. "I've always loved the name Sophia." "Sophia Blackwell," Adrian said, testing the sound. "It's perfect." Elena's heart skipped. She hadn't planned on the baby taking his name, but the way he said it, with such certainty and pride, made her realize how much she'd missed having someone to share these moments with. Over the following weeks, Adrian's presence in her life became routine. He attended every appointment, brought groceries, and spent evenings talking about their daughter's future. He showed her nursery furniture catalogs and college savings plan options. He talked about teaching Sophia to drive, about walking her down the aisle at her wedding. For the first time since the divorce, Elena allowed herself to hope. The turning point came on a rainy Thursday evening. Elena was struggling to assemble a crib Adrian had delivered, her pregnant belly making it impossible to maneuver the pieces properly. When he arrived with dinner, he found her sitting on the floor surrounded by scattered hardware, tears of frustration streaming down her face. "Hey," he said softly, kneeling beside her. "What's wrong?" "I can't do this," she sobbed. "I can't even put together a stupid crib. How am I supposed to raise a child?" Adrian pulled her into his arms, and she let him. She let herself remember what it felt like to be held, to be comforted, to not carry every burden alone. "You're the strongest person I know," he murmured against her hair. "You're going to be an amazing mother." "I'm scared, Adrian. I'm so scared." "I know, but you don't have to do this alone. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." That night, he stayed late to finish assembling the crib. Elena fell asleep on the couch watching him work, and when she woke the next morning, she found him covered by a blanket in the armchair beside her, still fully dressed. He'd stayed. He'd kept watch over her and their daughter. Maybe he really had changed. Elena's newfound sense of security lasted exactly 2 weeks. She was walking back from a grocery run when she saw the news van parked outside her building. Her stomach dropped as she recognized the reporter microphone testing equipment on the sidewalk. Her phone rang before she could decide whether to approach or flee. "Elena, don't talk to them." Adrian's voice was sharp with urgency. "Don't say anything to anyone." "What's happening?" "Someone leaked our situation to the press. They're calling it a scandal. The pregnant ex-wife, the new fiancé, the millionaire, caught between 2 women." Elena's blood ran cold. "Victoria. Probably. She's been furious since she found out about the baby." "Elena, I need you to pack a bag and come stay at my place, just until this blows over." "No." The word came out harder than she intended. "I'm not running back to you because you can't control your fiancé. This isn't about us. This is about protecting Sophia." Elena ended the call and approached her building through the back entrance, avoiding the reporters. But as she climbed the stairs to her apartment, she could hear her phone buzzing incessantly with calls from unknown numbers. The safety she'd begun to feel evaporated like morning mist. That evening, Marcus appeared at her door with takeout and grim news. "It's worse than just tabloid gossip," he said, showing her his phone. "Someone's been digging into your background. There are photos of you from when you were homeless. Stories about you being fired from your last job." Elena's hands shook as she scrolled through the articles. Every humiliation, every moment of desperation, laid bare for public consumption. "They're making me look like a gold digger who got pregnant on purpose." "We know that's not true. Do we?" Elena looked at Marcus with haunted eyes. "Maybe I did want this. Maybe part of me hoped that if I had his baby, he'd come back. Elena, don't let them get in your head." But it was too late. The seed of doubt had been planted, and Elena couldn't shake the feeling that she'd walked willingly into a trap that was only beginning to close around her. The restraining order arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a sheriff's deputy with apologetic eyes and a manila envelope that would change everything. Elena stared at the legal documents, her coffee growing cold as she tried to process the words. Victoria Sterling was requesting immediate protection from Elena Martinez, citing harassment, stalking, and threatening behavior toward both herself and her unborn child. Unborn child, Elena whispered to the empty apartment. According to the filing, Victoria was 3 months pregnant with Adrian's baby. The documents claimed Elena had been making threatening phone calls, following Victoria to various locations, and had even vandalized her car in a jealous rage. Elena's hands trembled as she reached for her phone to call Adrian, but stopped when she read the next paragraph. The restraining order specifically prohibited any contact with Adrian Blackwell, as he was listed as a potential victim of Elena's allegedly unstable behavior. She was trapped. Marcus arrived within an hour of her panicked phone call, his face grim as he reviewed the legal papers. "This is completely fabricated," he said. "You've been to maybe 3 places in the past month: the grocery store, the doctor's office, and here. But how do I prove that it's her word against mine, and she has money for better lawyers? We'll figure this out. But Elena, you need to be very careful. Don't go anywhere near Adrian or Victoria. Don't call, don't text, don't even drive by places where they might be." Elena nodded, but her mind was racing. If Victoria was really pregnant, then Adrian had been lying to her for weeks. All those tender moments, all his promises about being there for their daughter, had been elaborate deceptions. The hearing was scheduled for the following Friday, Judge Patricia Wells presiding. Elena spent the week in a haze of legal consultations and mounting dread. Her court-appointed attorney, a tired-looking man named Robert Chen, seemed overwhelmed by the case's complexity and his opponent's resources. "Ms. Sterling has some very compelling evidence," he admitted during their brief meeting. "Security footage, phone records, witness statements." "All fake," Elena insisted. "I've never contacted her. I've never been to any of the places she claims." "The footage looks authentic, and the witnesses seem credible." Elena felt like she was drowning in quicksand, every movement only making her sink deeper. The night before the hearing, she barely slept. Sophia seemed to sense her distress, moving restlessly inside her womb. Elena placed her hands on her belly and whispered promises she wasn't sure she could keep. "Whatever happens, baby girl, I'll protect you. I won't let them take you away from me." The courthouse was a maze of marble and mahogany, designed to intimidate. Elena sat beside her attorney, watching Victoria enter with a team of lawyers that probably cost more than Elena's annual income. Victoria looked radiant in a pale blue dress that showed the subtle curve of her allegedly pregnant belly. Judge Wells was a stern woman in her 50s, her gray hair pulled back severely, her dark eyes unforgiving. She reviewed the case files with practiced efficiency before calling the hearing to order. Ms. Sterling, please present your evidence. What followed was a masterclass in character assassination. Victoria's lawyers presented security footage showing a woman who looked remarkably like Elena vandalizing a white BMW. Phone records showing dozens of calls from Elena's number to Victoria's private line. Witness testimony from restaurant employees who claimed Elena had confronted Victoria at various upscale establishments. Elena watched in growing horror as her life was rewritten by experts in manipulation. The woman in the security footage moved like her, had her general build, even seemed to have her hair color. But Elena knew with absolute certainty that it wasn't her. Your Honor, Victoria said when called to testify, her voice trembling with what seemed like genuine fear. I've tried to be understanding about Ms. Martinez's situation. I know this pregnancy must be difficult for her, especially given her financial circumstances. But her behavior has become increasingly erratic and threatening. Can you describe specific incidents? She's called my phone 37 times in the past month, sometimes screaming accusations, sometimes just breathing heavily. She followed me to my doctor's appointment last Tuesday and confronted me in the parking lot. She said I was trying to steal her life, that I didn't deserve to carry Adrian's child. Elena wanted to scream that she'd been home last Tuesday, that she'd never even had Victoria's phone number. But her attorney placed a restraining hand on her arm. And the vandalism incident. My car was destroyed outside my apartment building. The word whore was keyed into the paint, and all 4 tires were slashed. The security cameras caught her doing it. Judge Wells reviewed the footage on a tablet, her expression grave. Ms. Martinez, how do you respond to these allegations? Elena stood on shaking legs. Your Honor, I've never contacted Ms. Sterling. I've never been to her apartment building or any of the places she's mentioned. I don't even know her phone number. The evidence suggests otherwise. The evidence is fabricated. That woman in the video isn't me. Judge Wells looked skeptical. Are you suggesting that Ms. Sterling has gone to elaborate lengths to frame you? Yes, Your Honor. That's exactly what I'm suggesting. For what purpose? Elena looked around the courtroom, realizing how insane her theory sounded. Because she wants my baby. The words hung in the air like an accusation too wild to be believed. Judge Wells made some notes, her expression unreadable. Given the evidence presented, I'm granting a temporary restraining order, Ms. Martinez. You are to have no contact with Ms. Sterling or Mr. Blackwell. You are prohibited from coming within 500 feet of their residences, workplaces, or any location where they might reasonably be expected to be present. Elena felt the world tilt sideways. Your Honor, Mr. Blackwell is the father of my child. How can I be prohibited from contacting him? You should have considered that before engaging in threatening behavior. This order will remain in effect until a full hearing can be scheduled to address custody arrangements. Custody arrangements? Elena realized with growing horror that this wasn't just about keeping her away from Adrian and Victoria. This was about taking her daughter. As she stumbled out of the courthouse, Elena felt like she was living in a nightmare where the rules of reality no longer applied. Someone had declared war on her life, and she was losing battles she didn't even know she was fighting. Marcus was waiting by his car, his face etched with worry. What happened? They won, Elena said simply. They won everything. That night, alone in her apartment with her phone disconnected and her future crumbling around her, Elena made a decision that would change everything. She was done being a victim. Marcus Torres had always prided himself on being a good friend, but as he sat in his apartment at 2 a.m. researching Victoria Sterling's background, he realized friendship sometimes required crossing lines he'd never crossed before. Elena was falling apart. The restraining order had cut her off from Adrian completely, just weeks before their daughter's birth. She'd stopped eating properly, stopped sleeping, and spent most of her time staring out the window like a prisoner planning an escape. "There has to be something," Marcus muttered to his laptop screen, scrolling through social media profiles and public records. Nobody's this perfect. Victoria Sterling's life read like a fairy tale. Born to a prominent family, educated at exclusive schools, involved in multiple charities. Her social media showed a carefully curated existence of gallery openings, charity galas, and exotic vacations. She looked happy, successful, and completely legitimate. But Marcus had learned to spot lies during his years as a paramedic. People in crisis revealed their true selves, and something about Victoria's performance in court had felt rehearsed. He called in a favor from his ex-girlfriend Sarah, who worked as a nurse at Cedars-Sinai. "I need you to check if someone's a patient there," he said. "Victoria Sterling. She's supposedly 3 months pregnant." "Marcus, I can't just look up random people's medical records. That's illegal." "This isn't random. My best friend is being destroyed by this woman, and I think she's lying about being pregnant." Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "What's her date of birth?" Marcus gave her the information from Victoria's public profiles. "I'll see what I can find. But if I get in trouble for this, you owe me big time." An hour later, Sarah called back. "There's no Victoria Sterling in our obstetric system. Never has been." "Are you sure?" "Positive." "And Marcus, I called 2 friends at other major hospitals. Same story. If she's pregnant, she's not getting prenatal care anywhere legitimate." Marcus felt a surge of excitement, the first crack in Victoria's perfect facade. He spent the next week following a trail that led through shell companies and offshore accounts. Victoria Sterling wasn't just a socialite. She was connected to people who moved money in very creative ways. Her charity work was a front for tax shelters. Her family's wealth came from sources that didn't bear close scrutiny. Most importantly, Victoria's social media showed her drinking wine at a gallery opening just 2 weeks ago. Not exactly typical behavior for a pregnant woman. The breakthrough came when Marcus remembered Elena mentioning that Adrian sometimes worked late at a construction site downtown. If Marcus happened to be in the area, and if he happened to see Adrian alone, and if they happened to have a conversation, that wouldn't be Elena contacting him through an intermediary. He found Adrian's Tesla parked outside a half-finished office building at 10 p.m. on a Thursday. Adrian was standing on the 20th floor, looking out at the city lights through the unfinished windows. "Mr. Blackwell." Adrian turned, his expression guarded. "You're Elena's friend, the paramedic?" "Marcus Torres, we need to talk." "I can't. The restraining order doesn't apply to me." Marcus stepped closer, noting the exhaustion in Adrian's eyes, the stubble that suggested he'd been working too hard and sleeping too little. "Elena didn't send me. This is my own investigation. Investigation into what? Your fiancé's lies." Adrian's face hardened. "Be very careful what you accuse people of. Victoria isn't pregnant." The words hit Adrian like a physical blow. He sank into a chair, his composure finally cracking. "That's impossible. I've seen the ultrasounds. Fake. Easily obtained online or from previous pregnancies. She's never been a patient at any obstetrics practice in the city. The morning sickness, the mood swings. Easy to fake if you're motivated enough. And she's been seen drinking alcohol in public as recently as 2 weeks ago." Marcus watched the information sink in, saw the moment when Adrian's carefully constructed world began to collapse. Why would she lie about something like that? Because she found out about Elena's pregnancy and realized her meal ticket was about to walk away. What better way to keep you than to claim she's carrying your child, too? Adrian stood abruptly, pacing to the window. The restraining order, the harassment claims. All fabricated. The security footage shows someone who looks like Elena. But if you analyze it closely, you'll see it's fake. Deepfake technology is sophisticated enough now to create convincing video evidence. How do you know all this? Marcus pulled out his phone, showing Adrian the evidence he'd compiled. Because I spent the last week investigating your fiancé instead of sleeping. Elena is my best friend, and I've watched her get destroyed by people with more money and fewer morals. Adrian studied the photos and documents, his face growing paler with each revelation. If this is true, then Elena is being systematically destroyed by a woman who wants to steal her life, starting with her baby. What do you mean? Marcus met Adrian's eyes steadily. Check the custody hearing documents. Victoria is listed as a potential guardian for Sophia. She's not just trying to keep you away from Elena. She's trying to position herself to take your daughter. Adrian's phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced at it, and his face went white. What is it? Victoria. She says Elena violated the restraining order. She's calling the police. Marcus felt ice form in his stomach. Where's Elena supposed to be right now? Home. The order confines her to her apartment except for medical appointments and grocery shopping. Then someone's setting her up again. Adrian was already moving toward the elevator, Marcus close behind. As they raced through the city streets, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that they were already too late. Elena's apartment building was surrounded by police cars, their red and blue lights painting the brick walls in urgent colors. Through the windows, Marcus could see officers escorting Elena out in handcuffs, her pregnant belly straining against the orange jumpsuit they'd given her. She looked directly at Adrian as they loaded her into the police car, and Marcus saw something in her eyes that chilled him to the bone. Elena had stopped fighting. She'd given up. The county jail cell smelled of disinfectant and despair, and Elena Martinez had never felt more alone in her life. 8 months pregnant, accused of violating a restraining order she'd never actually violated. She sat on the narrow cot watching her hands shake with exhaustion and stress. The baby inside her moved restlessly, as if sensing her mother's distress. Elena placed her hands on her belly and whispered apologies for the chaos she'd brought into their lives. I'm sorry, Sophia. I'm so sorry you're going to be born into this mess. The charges were serious: felony stalking, violation of a court order, criminal harassment. Elena's court-appointed attorney had been blunt about her chances. The evidence against you is overwhelming, Robert Chen had said during their brief consultation. Security footage, witness testimony, digital evidence. Ms. Sterling has documented every violation meticulously, because she's the one creating the violations. Elena had insisted, but even she could hear how desperate she sounded. The district attorney is willing to negotiate. If you plead guilty to the stalking charges and agree to surrender parental rights voluntarily, they'll recommend probation instead of prison time. Elena had stared at him in disbelief. Surrender my daughter. Given your circumstances, it might be the best option. Ms. Sterling and Mr. Blackwell can provide the kind of stable home environment that... Get out. Elena's voice had been deadly quiet. Get out, and don't come back unless you're planning to actually defend me. Now, 3 days later, Elena was beginning to understand the true scope of the trap she was in. Victoria hadn't just stolen Adrian, She'd systematically destroyed Elena's credibility, her freedom, and her future. The perfect crime, executed with precision and unlimited resources. The guard's voice interrupted her thoughts. Martinez, you have a visitor. Elena expected to see Robert Chen or perhaps Marcus trying to offer comfort he couldn't really provide. Instead, she found herself face to face with Dr. Sarah Chen, the emergency room doctor who treated her the day she collapsed. Dr. Chen, what are you doing here? Call me Sarah, and I'm here because something about your case has been bothering me for weeks. Sarah sat across from Elena in the visiting room, her expression serious. I've been practicing medicine for 15 years, and I've learned to recognize when something doesn't add up. Your supposed harassment of Victoria Sterling doesn't match the psychological profile of the woman I treated. You believe me. I believe that someone is playing a very sophisticated game, and you're being used as a pawn. Sarah leaned forward. Elena, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Have you ever given anyone access to your medical records? What, no? Of course not. Because someone has been accessing them multiple times over the past 6 weeks. Someone with administrative privileges at the hospital system. Elena's heart stopped. What are you talking about? Your pregnancy records? Your previous addresses? Your employment history? Even your mental health records from after your divorce? Someone's been building a comprehensive file on your vulnerabilities. How is that possible? Sarah's expression darkened. Judge Patricia Wells sits on the hospital's board of directors. She has administrative access to all medical records in the system. The room spun around Elena. The judge is working with Victoria. I can't prove it yet, but the access logs don't lie. Judge Wells reviewed your file the day before your restraining order hearing. She knew about your depression after the divorce, your financial struggles, your medical history. She knew exactly how to paint you as unstable. Elena felt sick. They've been planning this for weeks, months, possibly. Elena, there's something else. I've been researching Victoria Sterling's background, and her family has connections to several judges in the county system. They've been buying favorable rulings for years. Can you prove any of this? I'm trying, but I need time, and you don't have much left. Your trial is scheduled for next week, and if you're convicted, I lose Sophia forever. Sarah nodded grimly. Unless we can expose the conspiracy before then. That night, Elena lay awake feeling Sophia's increasingly urgent movements. Her daughter was running out of room, and Elena was running out of time. The stress was affecting the pregnancy. She could feel her body preparing for labor weeks too early. She closed her eyes and tried to think like Adrian used to think, strategically and ruthlessly. Victoria had made one mistake in her perfect plan. She'd assumed Elena would break under pressure, would accept defeat rather than fight back. But Elena had spent the last year surviving on the streets. She'd learned that sometimes the only way to win was to change the rules of the game entirely. When Marcus visited the next morning, Elena was ready. I need you to do something for me, she said without preamble. Something that's going to seem completely insane. Elena, whatever you're thinking, Victoria thinks she's destroyed my credibility. She thinks no one will believe anything I say. But what if I'm not the one saying it? Marcus leaned forward. What do you mean? Elena's smile was sharp as broken glass. I mean, it's time to give Victoria exactly what she wants, and then watch her destroy herself trying to take it. I don't understand. You will. But first, I need you to find Adrian, and I need you to tell him something that's going to change everything he thinks he knows about the woman he's planning to marry. Marcus looked skeptical, but Elena could see the hope beginning to kindle in his eyes. After days of watching his best friend accept defeat, he was ready to fight back. "What do you want me to tell him?" Elena's voice was steady as steel. "Tell him I know about the money laundering. Tell him I have evidence of his offshore accounts, his shell companies, everything. Tell him I'm willing to trade information about his criminal activities for my freedom." "Elena, that's blackmail." "No," Elena said quietly. "That's war." Adrian Blackwell stood in his penthouse office at midnight, staring at financial documents that painted a picture of systematic fraud spanning 5 years. Marcus Torres had delivered Elena's message 12 hours ago, and Adrian hadn't stopped moving since. The money laundering accusations weren't blackmail. They were accurate. His construction company had been washing money for Victoria's family since shortly after their engagement. What had started as a few suspicious contracts had evolved into a complex network of shell companies and offshore accounts. Victoria had presented it as tax optimization, legal maneuvering that every successful businessman used. Now, studying the evidence Elena claimed to possess, Adrian realized how completely he'd been manipulated. Sir Dmitri, his assistant, knocked softly on the office door. "Ms. Sterling is here." Victoria entered like she owned the building, which, Adrian realized with growing clarity, she essentially did. Her family's money had financed half his recent acquisitions. "Darling, you look terrible," she said, noting his rumpled clothes and unshaven face. "You need to get some sleep before the trial tomorrow." "Tell me about the money, Victoria." Her smile didn't waver, but something shifted in her eyes. "What money?" "The contracts with Meridian Holdings, the payments to Caribbean Development Corp., the numbered accounts in the Cayman Islands. Those are legitimate business expenses." "No, they're not." Adrian spread the documents across his desk. "They're money laundering. My company has been washing dirty money for your family, and I've been too blinded by ambition to see it." Victoria's mask finally slipped. The sweet socialite disappeared, replaced by someone much colder and more calculating. "Oh, Adrian, you knew exactly what those contracts were. You just didn't care because they were making you rich? I was an idiot, but I wasn't a criminal. Not intentionally. The FBI won't see it that way. Your signature is on every document. Your company processed every payment. If this comes to light, you'll spend the next 20 years in federal prison." Adrian felt the trap closing around him, understanding finally how Elena must have felt facing impossible odds with no good options. "What do you want?" "What I've always wanted. You, me, and our daughter, living the life we've planned." Our daughter, Victoria's hand moved to her still flat stomach. "Sophia will be ours. Adrian, Elena is going to prison, and will adopt the baby. A fresh start for all of us." The casual way she discussed stealing his child sent ice through Adrian's veins. "You're not pregnant." "No, but I will be soon, once Elena's out of the picture, permanently." "And if I refuse to go along with this," Victoria's smile was sharp as a blade, "then I'll make sure the FBI receives a comprehensive file documenting your criminal activities. I'll play the horrified fiancé who discovered her lover's crimes. You'll be destroyed, and I'll still get the baby." Adrian stared at the woman he'd planned to marry, seeing her clearly for the first time. "You orchestrated all of this? The restraining order, the harassment charges, even finding Elena on the street that day." "I didn't orchestrate your ex-wife's homelessness, darling. I just took advantage of it. Although I did make sure she lost her last few jobs. Amazing how quickly employers fire nurses when they receive anonymous tips about drug use. You've been destroying her life for months. I've been protecting our future, Elena was a threat that needed to be neutralized. Adrian felt sick. She's carrying my child. She's carrying our child. Sophia will never know Elena existed. She'll grow up believing I'm her mother, in a stable home with parents who can provide for her properly. The cold calculation in Victoria's voice was more terrifying than any threat. She'd systematically destroyed an innocent woman's life and felt no remorse whatsoever. I won't let you do this. You don't have a choice. The trial is tomorrow, and Elena will be convicted. The evidence is overwhelming because I made sure it was overwhelming. Victoria gathered her purse, preparing to leave. Get some sleep, darling. Tomorrow we start our new life together. After she left, Adrian sat alone in his office, surrounded by evidence of his own corruption and Elena's innocence. He thought about the woman who'd worked double shifts to put him through law school, who'd believed in his dreams when he had nothing but ambition and student debt. He'd betrayed her twice, once when he'd chosen success over love, and again when he'd been too blind to see the trap being laid around her. But Elena had given him one last gift, a way to expose the truth, even if it meant destroying himself in the process. Adrian picked up his phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in months. Marcus, it's Adrian. I need you to tell Elena something. Tell her I have the evidence she needs, and I'm ready to use it. What's the catch? Adrian looked around his penthouse office at the empire he'd built on lies and compromises. The catch is that exposing Victoria means exposing myself. I'll lose everything. And you're willing to do that? Adrian thought about Elena sitting in a jail cell, about his daughter growing up believing a lie, about the man he'd become versus the man he'd wanted to be. For Sophia, for Elena, yes, I'm willing to lose everything. The next morning, as Elena was transported to the courthouse for her trial, she had no idea that the man who'd broken her heart was about to sacrifice his empire to save her life. But she was about to find out that sometimes redemption comes at a price so high that only love can afford to pay it. The war Victoria Sterling had started was about to reach its conclusion, and the victor would be determined not by money or power, but by who was willing to risk everything for the people they loved. The courthouse was packed with reporters and curious onlookers, drawn by the drama of a pregnant woman accused of stalking a millionaire's fiancé. Elena sat beside her court-appointed attorney, her hands cuffed and her orange jumpsuit straining across her 8-month belly. She felt Sophia moving restlessly inside her, as if the baby sensed the tension in the room. Elena whispered silent apologies to her daughter for the circus surrounding her birth. All rise for the Honorable Judge Patricia Wells. Elena stood with difficulty, her pregnancy making every movement awkward. Judge Wells entered with her usual stern expression, but Elena noticed something different in her demeanor, a tension that hadn't been there during the restraining order hearing. Be seated. We'll begin with opening statements. The prosecutor, a sharp-faced woman named Jennifer Hayes, painted Elena as a dangerous stalker whose obsession with her ex-husband had escalated to criminal behavior. She presented the security footage, the witness testimony, the phone records, all the evidence that had seemed so compelling during the previous hearings. Elena's attorney gave a half-hearted defense, clearly overwhelmed by the mountain of evidence against his client. Then something unexpected happened. Your Honor, a voice called from the back of the courtroom. I have new evidence relevant to this case. Elena turned to see Adrian walking down the aisle, carrying a briefcase and looking like he hadn't slept in days. Behind him walked Marcus, Dr. Sarah Chen, and a woman Elena didn't recognize. Judge Wells frowned. Mr. Blackwell, you're not scheduled to testify today. Your Honor, I have evidence that Ms. Martinez is being framed, evidence that changes everything about this case. The prosecutor objected loudly, but Judge Wells seemed frozen, her face pale as she stared at Adrian. "Approach the bench," she said finally. Elena watched as Adrian and the attorneys huddled with Judge Wells, their voices too low to hear. She could see the judge's expression growing more alarmed with each passing minute. "Your Honor," Adrian said, returning to the center of the courtroom, "I request permission to address the court directly." "Mr. Blackwell, that's highly irregular. Given that my testimony will expose a conspiracy involving multiple felonies, including judicial corruption, I think irregular circumstances call for irregular procedures." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Judge Wells looked trapped, clearly wanting to deny the request, but unable to do so without raising suspicions. "Proceed, but keep it brief." Adrian turned to face the courtroom, his eyes finding Elena's for a moment before addressing the crowd. "My name is Adrian Blackwell, and I'm here to confess to multiple crimes: money laundering, tax fraud, and conspiracy to obstruct justice. I'm also here to expose the real criminal in this courtroom." He opened his briefcase and pulled out stacks of documents. "For the past 18 months, my company has been used to launder money for the Sterling family syndicate. Victoria Sterling orchestrated this operation using our engagement as cover for criminal activities." Victoria, sitting in the front row, went white as paper. But when Victoria discovered that my ex-wife was pregnant with my child, she saw Elena as a threat to her control over my finances. So she launched a systematic campaign to destroy Elena's life. Adrian presented bank records showing payments to the witnesses who testified against Elena. He showed technical analysis proving the security footage had been digitally manipulated. He revealed that Victoria had never been pregnant, producing medical records and the testimony of Dr. Chen. "Most damaging of all," Adrian continued, "Victoria bribed Judge Wells to ensure favorable rulings in this case." The courtroom erupted. Judge Wells banged her gavel frantically, but the chaos had already begun. "I have audio recordings of Victoria discussing the bribes, email communications detailing the frame-up, and financial records showing payments from Sterling family accounts to several court officials." Elena watched in amazement as her nightmare began to unravel. The woman who destroyed her life was being exposed as a criminal mastermind, and the man who'd broken her heart was sacrificing everything to save her. But Victoria Sterling wasn't finished. "You can't prove any of this," she screamed, standing up in the gallery. "Adrian is lying to protect his pregnant ex-wife. He's the one who's been laundering money, and now he's trying to frame me to save himself." "Actually," said the woman Elena didn't recognize, stepping forward, "I can prove everything Mr. Blackwell just said." She held up an FBI badge. "Special Agent Lisa Rodriguez. We've been investigating the Sterling family operation for 2 years. Mr. Blackwell contacted us yesterday and agreed to cooperate fully in exchange for immunity." Victoria's face went through a series of expressions: shock, rage, and finally, calculating coldness. "You think this changes anything?" she said to Elena. "You're still the homeless drug addict who can't take care of a child. Even if these charges are dropped, you're not fit to be a mother." Elena struggled to her feet, her pregnancy making the movement difficult, but her resolve absolute. "You're right about one thing," Elena said, her voice carrying clearly through the courtroom. "I'm not the same person I was when Adrian left me. I'm stronger. I'm a survivor. And I'm going to be the mother my daughter deserves, with or without anyone's help." She looked directly at Adrian. "I don't need you to save me anymore. I just needed you to tell the truth." Judge Wells, realizing her own criminal exposure, tried to maintain control. "All charges against Ms. Martinez are hereby dismissed. This court is adjourned pending further investigation." But Elena wasn't listening to the judge anymore. She was focused on the sudden, overwhelming pressure in her abdomen and the warm fluid running down her legs. "Marcus," she called weakly, "I think Sophia's ready to meet the world." As chaos erupted around her and Victoria Sterling was led away in handcuffs, Elena Martinez went into labor in a courthouse, surrounded by the wreckage of lies and the promise of truth, finally setting her free. 6 months later, Elena Martinez stood in the nursery of her new apartment, watching her daughter sleep peacefully in the crib Adrian had assembled all those months ago. Sophia was perfect. Dark hair like her mother's, determined chin like her father's, and an impressive set of lungs that she wasn't shy about using. The apartment was modest but comfortable, paid for not by Adrian's guilt money, but by Elena's own earnings. The whistleblower reward from the FBI had been substantial, and Elena had used it to finish her nursing degree and start a small home healthcare business. She was finally, truly independent. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Marcus stood on her doorstep with coffee and the warm smile that had gotten her through the darkest period of her life. "How's our girl today?" he asked, following Elena into the kitchen. "Fussy. I think she's getting another tooth." Marcus had been Sophia's honorary uncle since the day she was born, stepping into the role of family that Elena had thought she'd lost forever. He'd been there for every milestone, every sleepless night, every moment of joy and exhaustion that came with single motherhood. "Any word from the appeals court about Victoria's sentencing?" Marcus asked. Elena nodded. 25 years for racketeering, money laundering, and judicial corruption. Judge Wells got 15 years. Turns out they'd been running this scheme for a lot longer than anyone realized. And Adrian. Elena's expression grew more complicated. Still cooperating with the feds, the immunity deal kept him out of prison, but he lost everything else: his company, his assets, his reputation. "Do you feel sorry for him?" Elena considered the question while warming Sophia's bottle. "I feel sorry for the man he could have been, but the man he chose to become that man got exactly what he deserved." Adrian had tried to contact her several times after Victoria's arrest. He'd sent letters from federal holding, expressing his remorse and his desire to be part of Sophia's life. Elena had read them all, then filed them away unanswered. Some bridges, once burned, couldn't be rebuilt. "He's getting out of federal custody next week," Marcus said carefully. "He'll probably try to see Sophia." "He can try, but I won't make it easy." Elena had learned hard lessons about trust and forgiveness. She'd forgiven Adrian for his betrayal, not because he deserved it, but because holding on to anger was exhausting. But forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. And it certainly didn't mean allowing him back into their lives without proving he'd fundamentally changed. Sophia's cry interrupted their conversation. Elena retrieved her daughter from the nursery, marveling as she always did at the fierce love that filled her chest whenever she held this small person who depended on her completely. "There's my beautiful girl," Elena murmured, settling into the rocking chair to feed her daughter. As Sophia drank her bottle, Elena reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. The collapse on the sidewalk that had seemed like the end of everything had actually been the beginning of the most important chapter of her life. She'd learned that she was stronger than she'd ever imagined, that she could survive homelessness and betrayal and systematic destruction of her life and still find the strength to build something better from the ashes. Most importantly, she'd learned that she didn't need anyone else to complete her story. A year ago, Elena had been a broken woman sleeping in her car, convinced that her life was over. Now she was a successful businesswoman, a devoted mother, and a survivor who'd turned her pain into purpose. The doorbell rang, and Marcus went to answer it. Elena could hear voices in the hallway, including one that made her stomach tighten with familiar tension. Adrian appeared in the nursery doorway, looking nothing like the polished millionaire she'd once known. His expensive suits had been replaced by jeans and a simple shirt. His perfectly styled hair was longer, less controlled. He looked older, humbler, and somehow more real. "Hello, Elena." Adrian. She didn't stand, didn't invite him in. Sophia had finished her bottle and was dozing against Elena's shoulder. "She's beautiful," he said softly, his eyes fixed on their daughter. "She looks like you." "What do you want?" "To apologize, to try to make amends for what I put you through." Elena studied his face, looking for signs of the man who'd coldly presented her with divorce papers, who'd chosen money over love, who'd been too blind to see the trap closing around the mother of his child. "Apologies are easy. Adrian, what are you going to do to earn forgiveness?" "Whatever it takes. I've spent the last 6 months in therapy, working through my issues with success and control. I've liquidated my remaining assets to establish a trust fund for Sophia's education. I've started working as a paralegal for a legal aid clinic, helping people who can't afford lawyers." Elena was surprised, despite herself. "A paralegal. Turns out my law degree is still valid, even if I can't practice anymore. I'm helping families navigate the same kind of legal system that almost destroyed you." "It was a start," Elena admitted to herself, "but it was only a start." "I don't know if I can trust you again," she said honestly. "I don't know if I want to try. I understand. But Elena, I want to be part of Sophia's life. I want to be the father she deserves, not the man I was when I lost you." Sophia stirred in Elena's arms, opening her dark eyes and looking curiously at the stranger in her nursery. Adrian's breath caught as his daughter focused on his face for the first time. "Hi, Sophia," he whispered. "I'm your daddy, and I promise I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of you." Elena felt tears prick her eyes despite her resolve to stay strong. The man standing in her nursery wasn't the Adrian she'd married or the one who'd divorced her. This was someone new, shaped by consequences and humbled by loss. Maybe, just maybe, this was the man she'd always hoped he could become. "She can know you," Elena said finally, "but slowly, on my terms. And if you ever hurt her the way you hurt me—" "I won't, I swear to you, Elena, I won't." As Elena watched Adrian gently touch their daughter's tiny hand, she realized that some stories didn't have perfect endings. They had real endings, complicated and messy and full of possibility. She'd saved herself. She'd built a life worth living. And maybe, just maybe, she was strong enough now to let others be part of it. But this time, she'd be the one setting the rules. This time, she'd never forget her own worth. And if Adrian Blackwell wanted to be part of their family, he'd have to prove every single day that he'd learned the difference between success and happiness, between having everything and having what mattered. Elena Martinez had risen from the ashes of betrayal to build something beautiful. And she'd never let anyone take that away from her again. If this story of justice, betrayal, and second chances moved you, hit that like button and let me know in the comments what you thought about Elena's incredible journey. Have you ever had to rebuild your life from nothing? Share your thoughts below. And if you want more powerful stories of people overcoming impossible odds, subscribe and ring that notification bell. Because every week, I bring you true tales of human resilience that will restore your faith in justice. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next.